So one thing we have learned is that the ventilation usually failed to be properly installed. And maybe 10 years ago, we are assuming that if there is a ventilation system, it was working properly. While we have realized since then that usually it's not designed properly, it's not installed properly, it's not maintained properly, so at the end it does not provide the flow rate that it's supposed to provide. And so we cannot move on with regulation. We cannot decide what would be the right flow rate as long as we don't have ventilation systems that do actually provide the flow rate. So maybe one thing that is really stressed, and also again it's in the PBD new it's a new directive, European directive. We need to do the inspection of ventilation system, and we need to do that on a regular basis to check that it actually provides the flow rate it's supposed to provide within the space and not through leakage of ductwork or things like that. So that was thing we have learned, I think. And things that are moving on now is a new way of making regulation. We have been very prescriptive for ever, I would say, regarding regulation, saying, okay, you need to put that flow rate. But this is no longer working because this is not energy efficient and this is not indoor air quality efficient. What we need is first to have only needed flow rate, so to limit the sources, and we need this flow rate to come at the right place at the right moment.
To play devil's advocate here, if we've been so poor so far at getting even the basics right of saying, I want half an air change an hour in this room, or 10 litres a second per person, or half an air change an hour in a residential setting. And every time we go and look at it, we're nowhere near. What's different now with a prescriptive or performance-based standard with additional complexity that comes with that? Are we moving too fast? Should we have been able to say we can do the basics first before moving on to systems where we, to unpack whether a fan is doing what it should do, I can go and measure the fan and see if it's doing what it should do. If I now need to understand if a sensor's control algorithm is correct or not, or whether the outcome that I saw in a room was because of the sources or because of the ventilation system, that's a complicated world, I guess. So as a devil's advocate, are you comfortable moving into this kind of performance-based world with the history that we have of the prescriptive world?
Well, I think this is the opportunity for those, those smarter systems will be more expensive, basically. They will be less. We've got very cheap system right now in most countries. I would say extract-only system is not expensive. Giving some smartness in the system will make them more expensive, and this is also the opportunity to go further and to include the auto control in the system. And I think, the way we are doing it in France for the performance-based regulation is that they have to justify that the system is performing well, but they have also to justify how we will inspect them. What is the inspection protocol? How can we check that it's actually working? So the system needs to be synced at the same time with the inspection protocol and how we can check it, and also, hopefully, with some kind of auto control to make sure that the performance are still running after year.
I'm afraid that I have to say it, that we are probably not near where we would like to be with ventilation. To be honest, even 10 years, even 20 years ago, we are in the same situation. I think that there has been some development in ventilation, but I think it was mainly driven by the energy and not by the other aspects. Ventilation is sort of invisible healer. So you have air pollution is invisible killer, here is invisible healer. So you provide it to dilute those invisible pollutants, right? So no one is probably requiring certification. Anyone can install it because it's really, no one will see whether it's working or not working, right? So if I make an analogy to water system, it's just like, if you have a plumbing without certifications, and then if you open the for the water, then it's no water coming, right? Or very little dripping, just only. So would you be upset? Of course you would be upset. And if you try to flush your toilet, it's not going, you would be also upset. And here we have no method to check whether this is what air is dripping and whether we can remove the air from that. And then I think what Valerie was saying is actually everything that is problem of the ventilation today is that basically there is no certification for, there's no certification for installing it. There is no ways of checking whether they work, even for the energy point of view properly. Not even mentioning for the performance based for the pollutants. I just want to remind you that when the report from the Netherlands was published, I think it was 2016 or 2017, when they found out that most of the ventilation systems in Netherlands were just closed down by the users because either they were noisy or there was a lot of draft or there was some smell coming from them, and that was just, it was terrible because people didn't want to have it. Mm-hmm. But it was not because of the mistakes that were made, that they are not properly implemented.
The interesting thing about performance-driven systems is they change the narrative around what a good outcome is. Because with a prescriptive system, the outcome is, does it exist, and is there a bit of paper that said it complied with a reg at some point, a regulation at some point? Whereas with a performance-based system, the framing is completely different. You're putting this in for an outcome, not for a prescription. And I think that change in framing helps the conversation. So perhaps downstream at a user end, the expectation is that this thing is automated and will deliver an outcome in the same way a thermostat should deliver thermal comfort. The expectation is perhaps that a ventilation system that's based on performance will deliver an air quality outcome, and people be more attuned to that.